that's what we need to do. We don't need to do it in the future. You got a president saying we're going to have spending cuts, we're going to freeze spending in a couple of years. I mean, if you want to lose weight, you don't put on 200 pounds first and then decide to go on a diet. You do it right now. We can't afford to increase the size of government when it's already enormous, right? So we have to do this stuff and do it now. And there are a lot of things that we can do in government that aren't even going to cost any money. I can give, that can solve problems. I'll mention two real quick, and then I'll take some of your questions. But one of them is healthcare. And I know there's a lot of talk about what are we going to do about healthcare. Well, healthcare is an example of a problem that shouldn't even exist. It's a problem that government created, and government can solve very quickly by getting out of the way. The biggest problem in healthcare is that nobody pays for their own anymore. It's all through insurance, and everybody gets it from their employer. And it wasn't always that way. People used to buy health insurance the same way they buy life insurance or fire insurance or automobile insurance. And we're not having any problems there. I mean, those insurance policies, they're not running out of control. It's only in health insurance, and it's only because of the way we pay for it. Health insurance comes from our employer. Why is that? Well, the government passed a law and said if you get health insurance from your employer, you don't have to pay any taxes on it. If he pays you wages, and then you go buy your own health insurance, you got to pay taxes on it. So that created this incentive for employers to compensate their workers with health insurance instead of money. But now, what the employee wanted was he didn't really want health insurance. He wanted his medical costs paid through his employer, because that way it was a tax deduction. So what everybody did is try to shift all their medical costs into their insurance policies and created a situation that made prices go through the roof. Because insurance is not to pay for everyday things. It's not, when you go to the doctor because you sprain your ankle or because you have the flu, there shouldn't be any insurance companies involved in that. You should just pay for that. But the problem is it's all being done through the insurance companies, and the costs are going out of control because no one cares what anything costs. No one shops around. If people had homeowners insurance like that, I mean, right now you get homeowners insurance, you get a $5,000 deductible. You don't put in an insurance claim when your toilet overflows. You call a plumber. But if we were doing home insurance the same way we do health insurance, then when the plumber called, when your toilet overflows, you'd call the insurance company, and you'd have to fill out a bunch of forms, and it probably cost $5,000 to fix the toilet, but you wouldn't care because it wasn't your money. So if we can simple reform, we'll solve it. All we got to do, and one of the easy ways to do it, and there's a number, but you can say, okay, if you get health insurance from your employer, and let's say that policy costs your employer $10,000 a year, you can go to your employer and you can say, I don't want the insurance, I'll take the $10,000. And the $10,000 comes tax-free as well. Doesn't cost the government any money because it's the same deduction from the employer. All that happens is $10,000 goes to you instead of the health insurance company. Now, what do you do with that $10,000? Well, you go and buy yourself a major medical plan with a high deductible that might only cost $3,000 a year. And now you have $7,000 that you didn't have. And that way, if you sprain your ankle, you got cash to pay for it. If you get the flu, you have cash to pay for it. And what's going to happen in that case is costs are going to come down, because now people are going to start paying for things. Just like when your toilet overflows and you call, you don't just go to the first. You call 3 or 4 plumbers. You find out who's the cheapest, or you do it yourself. A lot of times people go to the doctor. They just you can just take some over. You don't have to go to the doctor every time you sneeze. If you got insurance, you do. So what's going to happen is people will start shopping around. They'll start questioning things. If the doctor says, well, you need all these tests, say, well, how much is that test going to cost? Well, it's $10,000. Well, do I really need it? And you say, what are the odds that I actually have this disease? And they might say, well, the odds are probably a little better that you'll be struck by lightning during the test than you actually have something. Then you might want to do it. But right now, because of all the lawsuits and the insurance, they run every test under the sun, whether you need it or not. So there are a lot of things that we can do, free market, right, to bring down the cost of healthcare dramatically. Because healthcare should be getting less expensive every year. There's no reason that it's not. My father had an insurance agency in Connecticut before the government got involved. His best-selling policy in the 50s and 60s, his best-selling policy cost $25 a year. $2 a month. That's all it cost. And he said that the maximum that it would pay out on a claim was $5,000. So if you got an accident, or you got cancer, or you had a brain tumor, if it was over $5,000, it wouldn't pay anymore. My father said in all the years he sold that policy, there was never a time when anybody had costs that exceeded $5,000. That's how cheap healthcare was before the government got involved in it. And it's the same thing with education. Education is another problem. The cost of education is running through the roof. Why is that? Government. In the last few years, even in 2008, everything is going down. Everything is on sale. Everybody is cutting prices, except healthcare and education. College tuitions went up in 2008. It went up again in 2009. How is that possible? It's possible because the government guarantees student loans. The government tells anyone in this country, if you want to go to college, the government will make sure that you can borrow all the money you need to pay whatever the inflated tuitions the colleges want to charge. That is a self-perpetuating spiral that has caused tuition prices to go out of control. Before the government got involved in subsidizing student loans, college tuitions didn't go up. Sometimes there'd be 40 or 50-year time periods where they weren't even raised. It wasn't until the government got involved that prices started going like this. So all we have to do is get the government to stop guaranteeing student loans. That does two things. Number one, all that money that used to be loaned to students to pay tuitions, now that money is available to businesses to actually create jobs for those guys when they graduate. We need that money to go to entrepreneurs, not universities. Number two, you stop subsidizing college tuitions, what happens? Well, nobody can afford to pay the tuitions without the government guaranteed loans. Nobody would lend them the money. So what's going to happen? No one's going to be going into college. So the universities are going to do exactly what the airlines do when no one's buying tickets. They have a sale. They cut prices. Universities are going to slash tuition until people can actually afford to go. That's what's going to happen. And once that happens, and now the universities start losing money because they've cut their tuitions from $15,000 a year to $2,000 a year, what are they going to do? Well, they're going to go to the college professors and they're going to say, you know what? We need to cut your pay. Because if we don't cut your pay, we can't afford you. And what are the college professors going to do? They can't quit because all the universities are going to be cutting pay. They're going to have to go through all the people that are working there. Who don't we need? What can we cut? Maybe we don't need this big fancy gymnasium. Maybe we should sell it. All kinds of things are going to happen to put pressure and bring down the cost of college because it should be cheaper to go to college today than it was 10 or 20 years ago. There's no question it should be cheaper. It shouldn't be more expensive. Computers are cheaper. Televisions, a lot of things are cheaper than they were 10 or 20. Why not education? Now, my father went to University of Connecticut. His parents didn't give him any money to go. And he didn't borrow any money. But he still went. How did he go? He had a summer job. He waited tables, and that was it. That's all he had to do. That's all anybody had to do to afford college until the government got involved. So if the government gets out of the way, prices will collapse. And if you think about it from an economic point of view, look at the economies of scale. A long time ago, not that many kids went to college. Now you got plenty of kids. If I'm a professor and I got 20 kids in my class, and now I've got 200 or 1,000, the cost per kid is coming down. Plus, you got all these computers. It's so much easier now to keep track of the students, to grade their exams, and it should be cheaper. It's only because of government. So a lot of things that we can do right away that will cost nothing, that will immediately bring down a lot of costs. But the biggest thing that we got to do is we got to stop the runaway government spending that is bankrupting the country. And if I can get the Republican nomination, I think I am the only candidate who's running for this nomination that can actually win this thing. I think I can beat Blumenthal, and I think I can beat him badly. He's way up here. Everybody thinks he's great because nobody really knows anything about him. They know his name because he's been around for 20 years. But wait till I get finished dragging that name through the mud. Look at what he's done in the 20 years he's been there, right? He started off with a tiny little department and blew it out of proportion. The state of Connecticut is in a disaster fiscally. We're the most indebted state per capita in the entire country, right? That's a record he wants to run on. Look at all the lawsuits that he's filed. So we're going to send you to Washington for what reason? To file more lawsuits? That's going to do it. We're going to sue our way to prosperity. There's no way that he can take. Hey, I've done all this damage in Connecticut, so send me to Washington. Let me do it on a bigger scale. He can't really run as an outsider because he's an insider. Just because he's inside at Hartford doesn't mean he can run an outsider campaign. Whereas I can't. He just made a big deal that he filed this lawsuit against the rating agencies. Okay, great.